Hello YouTube, welcome back to a brand new video. My name is Kevin and this is the Red Pilled American. I just wanted to run by you guys the latest news. I'm sure a lot of you guys heard it. I mean, it's kind of a big deal, but I wanted to talk about as you might have heard that Pope Francis has officially passed away at the age of 88. He died this past Monday, um, right after Easter. Um, I would say I believe it wasn't really that much of a shock. He was battling a lot of health issues in the last several months, and JD Vance was the last person. Vice President JD Vance was the last person to meet him, and looks like he died in his sleep or something because they said that he died of a stroke. That seems to what they ruled as the cause of death. So, but it was coming. He was in bad shape, so. Yeah, so I just want to talk a little about my thoughts on his legacy and about who I think the next pope should be. So, in my opinion, so I guess I'll start with his legacy. So, I'll be honest, I don't have a lot to say about him because again, I'm not really Catholic. I'm a Lutheran, so it's just not something I ever paid much of attention to. But I will say he definitely said a lot of questionable things that really made people question some of the stuff he said. I'll put it nicely. He may not have been as leftist as people made it out to be. I think the media a lot of times would take what he said out of context a lot, and I think a lot of people would take his words out of context a lot of times. But I do think there's a lot of times he worded things very poorly. But I also think he also was lukewarm on things that really has hurt the church. You know, I think he was way too focused on the political rather than circling us back to God. Now, here's the thing. I do believe Christians are supposed to be the moral guide of society. So the Pope historically has always been that moral guide to circle us back to God at the end of the day. And well, it's supposed to be that influence, but now it's just, gotten so lukewarm on basic moral values and things like, is there if hell's about hell not being real, chanting the Lord's Prayer, um, being lukewarm on the homosexual LGBTQ stuff. He never permitted gay marriage, but he did lukewarm things like blessing them. So it's just a lot of really kind of controversial things that he said and has allowed. And um, I don't know. To me, I hate to say it, but I think, you know, what's his legacy? And I might offend some people, but I think his legacy is really kind of being lukewarm, kind of moving the Catholic Church into a more progressive, you know, modern direction, postmodern direction, rather than sticking to the truth regardless of times. Even, I don't know what some of your guys' views are on like women's pastors and stuff. He never allowed that per se, or like women priests and stuff. He never gone that far. I think the only thing I agree with them on is allowing maybe if people maybe priests to marry. Maybe that might have been one that I felt was the most accurate because I don't know. I do think the Catholic Church misinterprets the whole staying celibate, making priests and nuns stay single, and I do think that's had a lot of unintended consequences, let's just say, for forcing that. And I can understand why they do that, but I don't know. It's just that's the only thing I would say I agree with what he said. And I know I guess he was he was an anti-abortion progressive basically because he was basically liberal on just about everything political. Now I know there's the theology and there's the politics. Sometimes they're not always mutually exclusive. He was from Argentina originally. I do think he kind of grew up in a more socialistic um, influence, so a lot of that I think rubbed on him. Um, Too much on government. I think his views on the vaccine that happened was wrong. You know, he was. I think the left. I think he was a pawn of the left because of his open borders, mass immigration standpoint, open borders stuff. And, he was a globalist, or he was a pawn of the globalists, just to put it that way. And so I just think, what's his legacy? Well, as I'll say, he probably isn't as progressive as maybe some of the evangelicals make him out to be. He was right a lot of times, but I do think I never feel like he really circled us back to God and pointed the church. And I feel like the church has kind of moved in the wrong direction under his leadership, just by things that he says, trying to almost play both sides. And I believe that's not the job of the church. The church is supposed to stick to the truth, and stick to the truth regardless of what the world thinks. We're supposed to be, as the Bible says, we're in the world, but we're not of it. So we're supposed to, be the salt. And so, I said in my last video about, Gen Z converting, that there's something going on about them converting because of tradition. And, it's kind of interesting, these leftists, like churches that are kind of trying to embrace the worldly beliefs, and they're doing worse than the traditional churches. In fact, the traditional churches, the conservative, going back to the Bible, are succeeding. Because why is that? Because why are they succeeding? Well, I believe God is going to bless the church that sticks to the truth. I don't believe God's long term is going to let those churches thrive. I also believe ultimately the young people are looking for truth. Like, I'm a young person, I'm a Lutheran. I converted to Lutheranism because of the tradition, the liturgy. I wanted meaning out of worship, not just a rock band, and not. And a lot of these evangelical churches, they may have you can say they may have good music, but a lot of their theology is kind of not the best on a lot of things, and too much focus on self than serving. So, and at the end of the day, we're searching for something different, something meaning, something that's different than what the world's trying to shove at us. And young people want tradition, because guess what? The Catholic Church really has been the only church that has stuck really strong to the beliefs since the beginning. They're the oldest church. So, they're the oldest church body. So it's like, even things like divorce, like they don't really allow divorce. I mean, things like remarriage, you can debate if there's some exceptions for that or not, but they were really conservative on those moral values, on family. I think they're probably the best on the morals and the value of life than than of all the Christian denominations, with the exception of LCMS. But okay, I'm biased, sorry. But so I do respect the Catholic Church, a lot of it because of the moral guide, and I feel Francis, maybe he wasn't the worst. I do feel like there could have been worse. That's the thing. There's probably way worse popes. Who knows? What if we have a progressive pope that says it's okay to microchip yourself? Think about that. I mean, it could always be worse, but I do feel it took us down a bad direction. So I think that's my opinion of legacy, being at very most, I'll put it nicely, very weak on the things that we needed. And I think confusing both sides too much. I think some of his political views and theology, I think, drove out a lot of Catholics, where they just don't go to church because of that. So I do think he's hurt a lot of people because of that. Then there was the thing with the sex abuse scandal that happened several years ago. That hurt a lot of people, and they kind of covered it up. So it's like, well, man, it just, so to me, he was not a good leader for the church, and was not the one who should be leading the main voice of the Catholic Church. So now that's my legacy. I don't really have much else to say. Again, I never paid attention that much. That's just from what I know. As for who the next pope should be, that's a hard one. There's this one guy that I do respect. I've been hearing a lot. He likely is just a buzzword online, but he goes by Cardinal Robert Sarah, and he is actually an African, ethnically African. And, the left say people say the first, black pope, and it's like, see, I don't care if he's black or white or whatever. I just want, if pope is going to exist, it needs to be a pope. The next pope needs to be someone who is not afraid and can't be controlled or influenced by the the influences of the world and the politics. I think that's why John Paul, I think he was Polish Catholic. That's why he was so unique, because at that time, because he didn't compromise at hard times, and we need that all the more. The church needs to be the ground, the salt of the earth. I mean, and then, he has some famous quotes too. I saw that, here's some famous quote that Robert Sarah quoted, that from his quotes: "The West has denied its Christian roots. A tree without roots dies." It's true. The West doesn't have roots right now. In fact, a lot of ways, Africa, he's African descendants. I mean, Africa's more Western in values wise than the West actually is right now. Generally because of the atheism by the leadership they're promoting, and because of mass migration. He also has this belief that, here's other quotes by him: "Those who use the Bible to justify mass immigration are bewitched." I mean, think about it. People use the Bible and twist the Bible all the time, and it's true. It's true. I mean, gender ideology is a Luciferian refusal to receive a sexual nature from God. Yep, yeah, it's. I mean, a lot of bold things, and he's kind of more of a nationalistic pole, which Pope, and so I don't know. I highly doubt it's going to be him, but he would be my favorite pick. We need someone who's bold, and someone who can kind of, that I believe God could use to move the voice back to the Bible. And really, I don't want a left or right. I don't want a right wing or left wing pope. I just want a pope that sticks to the Bible. That's all I can ask for if they're going to exist. So, I mean, that's my opinion on who should be. I feel like it's going to be somebody. I think it's going to be probably a centrist pope. He might be a little bit more conservative, at least politically, than Francis will be, but it's probably not going to be very far right or very far left in the political aspect of it. I guess right wing, I want him to be theologically right, if that makes sense. That's all I'm looking for, if that's going to exist. So I believe it matters for not just the Catholic Church, but the Protestant evangelical church too, because we need to get back the moral truth back. And right now, this whole moral relativism needs to be thrown out the door. This postmodern view, a pope needs to reject this whole postmodern view that this modern world has been sucked in the West. And the reason I think an African pope makes sense, right now, the heart of Christianity of the world right now is actually in Africa, or it's becoming that way. It's the fastest growing religion in Africa right now, is Christianity. And like I say, I feel they're more Western on values than we are. And in a lot of cases, you have Africans sending missionaries here. At my church, we have some African pastor that kind of share our church a little bit for theirs. So yeah, so I believe that would be interesting for sure. Something different, someone that believes in moral, and why not have someone represent from a part where Christianity is big in. That would be interesting. So that would be my pick. But, I just want someone who sticks to the Bible. I don't care what the race is. That should never be a consideration, ever. So, anyway, that's all I have. Let me know what do you guys think? Who should the next pope be? What do you guys think? Do you not care? Anyway, that's all I have. Again, if you like this channel and this video, please like this channel. Please subscribe if you like this channel. Like if you like this video. Hit the bell for notifications. Red Pilled American, out.